the DOJ's action against Apple. This is MacVoices. MacVoices is supported by Take Control Books, one of the very best sources of clear, concise information on not only Apple's various operating systems, but also key Apple and third-party utilities and more. Visit TakeControlBooks.com and start your library today. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is MacVoices Live. It's Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time that is, wherever you are. You should be with us on YouTube at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV. We already have a bunch of our friends in there, as well as one or two missing panel members who couldn't be with us tonight, but they're here in spirit, so to speak. So please mark your calendars, join us in the chat room, and share your thoughts, your ideas, your comments on our comments. We'd love to hear them. We have a fair amount of stuff tonight, some expected, some maybe not quite so expected. So I'm just going to run around the room right now and we'll let you know who's here, see if anybody else shows up during the introductions, and then we'll get to it. As always, first in, top left of my screen, Mr. David Ginsburg. David, good to see you.
Good to see you. Doing great. Glad to be here. Coming off of a great episode on the Untouchable iOS last week with Marty Jencius was on the show for the first time. We had a great time.
Great time.
And we're coming up with the 300th episode pretty soon here. But other than that, I'm doing great and looking forward to this conversation about the DOJ and Apple.
Great. Yeah, that's going to be one of the topics. No question about that. Playing the outfield tonight, Mr. Ben Roethig. Ben, good to see you. I'm sorry that you can't see your beloved Cubs, but I'm glad you're here and with them in spirit.
I'm glad to be here, Chuck, and you don't want me playing the outfield. I can't catch a fly ball, and I have an arm like a, pretty much a rubber band gun.
Oh, okay. All right. Again, I don't know much about baseball, but that sounded good. So, Jim Ray, I'm not sure if Jim knows anything about baseball or not, but he knows a lot about development, and I'm darn glad he's here. Good to see you, Jim.
Everybody knows about baseball. There's no crying.
There's no crying in baseball.
And I am not looking forward to this.
You haven't seen that movie, have you, Chuck?
I have no idea what that is completely lost on me.
A League of Their Own with Tom Hanks, Gina Davis. It was a women's
Madonna.
Madonna.
Well, I remember something about her being in one.
Rockford Peaches.
Yep. They played at Wrigley Field in Chicago too.
Anyway, I feel like there's a Chicago takeover of this show at times.
Sweet home, Chicago.
Please, Ben, no singing. It's worse than your outfield play. Marty Jencius is here with a little bit of a change to his background. Marty, good to have you.
Yeah, I got the Yum poster mounted and placed back on the wall. And, my daughter saw the poster when it came and she said, Dad, you've got to frame this. This is artwork. And so I followed up on it and got that done. I'm in the YouTube feed. I'm looking at the YouTube feed. I'm in the middle of it. And that I feel like Alice from the Brady Bunch. I don't know if I want to be Alice from the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, it's
I was thinking more like Paul Lynde. So
yeah, center square. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how on my screen I see one version, but when I look at YouTube, there's a whole nother one. So, and then people turn their cameras on and off, and it jumps all over the place. Good to have you, Marty.
Good to be here, Chuck.
Back in a tie, like the universe intended, Mr. Brian Flanigan-Arthurs. Brian, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be back. Good to be back from spring break. I feel like myself again.
Is it really good to be back from spring break, Brian?
I was going to say.
It is. It really is. I like to get back to routine.
Yeah, I understand.
Brian, this week is our spring break, so I'm taking lots of naps and getting nothing done.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
My wife is off this week, and she's in Punta Cana.
So did you change places with my dog?
Well, Bixby is here, and he has shaved, and he looks more like himself again. Good to see
Yeah,
you.
well,
man.
I said that I was going to, while I was on my little 6-week sabbatical, that I wasn't going to shave, and I didn't, and my sabbatical's over, and I did. So, and tonight's background is another quilt that was created through handkerchiefs that I had that matched neckties. So that's what all those are back there, are different neckties that I had. Yes, I had a lot of ties.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Bud, because it looks like the only thing I can think of, certain panels look like almost a pinwheel, as opposed to just a geometric. So it's very, very different. Very nice.
And each one of those pinwheels is the actual part of the handkerchief. So.
Okay, good. Yeah, I like it. I love your recycling methods. It's great. Last but not least, showing up just a little bit behind, but hey, he's here. Mark Fuccio. Mark, good to see you.
Hello, everyone.
Mark, you sound good again this week. I think we've got the mic thing figured out.
I think we do. So I'm here with my Rota podcaster, which I don't know, maybe comes in and out if I jiggle it, but Zoom fades it out of the background.
So we always have to ask what your background is.
My background is a limerick that I had Microsoft's Copilot LLM create because I think it weighs heavily over what I think we're going to be talking about tonight. So,
So wait a minute. So we have an AI generated limerick to comment on a story tonight. That's a first somewhere. I don't know. That's cool. That's cool.
Unless you want to talk about Travis and Taylor or Mike.
Gosh, no.
They're not here.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So obviously we have to start out with the DOJ action against Apple. I'm going to throw, as we're talking, I'm going to throw a number of articles into our chat rooms because what I did this time was a little different. I asked the panel to submit some article links that they found particularly incisive or particularly interesting. And so I got back at several. And so I'll be throwing those in the chat room. I've got through, and I also have a couple of mine as well. But it's been very interesting to see how this has been analyzed by all the press, the tech press, the more mainstream press, and everything. That they acknowledge that there are a couple. What I get overall from it is there's some arguments they can kind of see that, okay, at least the DOJ has an argument. And that's up for debate. And then there are other places it's just flat out silly. And it almost demonstrates something we've talked about for a long time here on MacVoices, that some of the elected officials are wanting in their tech knowledge. But for them, for the DOJ to file something, as potentially onerous as this, and not have all the ducks in a row and not have consulted people that know what they're doing, just is really surprising. Who wants to start?
Dog ate my homework.
You what?
I said the dog ate my homework.
Dog ate your homework. Yeah, that's all right. Webb, you were busy shaving. Well, Mark, how about if I start with you, because you're the guy that took the time to get a limerick about this.
Okay, and I must confess, I also wasted part of my life that I'll never get back reading the text of their complaint, and I would just say it seems that it's motivated by a belief that Apple must be punished because they're big and successful, and they seem to invent things to support their case, like they invent a segment they call the performance smartphone segment. It's, well, what is that? And then they seem to invent other facts like Apple's increasing the prices on their phone, but it's not by force, and they have very low, $500 or less entry level phones all the way up to $1,500-$1,600, and people seem to increasingly each year go to the higher end models because they see value there. Then they create applications and they think a category they call super apps. And then, they say, well, these are apps that are developed using HTML and JavaScript. And it's kind of like a platform, that you can use to deliver, very specific functionality. And it's sort of like, duh, haven't you ever guys heard of a web browser? I mean, you have Safari built in, but you can also use Chrome. You can also use other browsers. And then I think the last, sort of, thing of insanity is, and I think this just shows really, sort of just bad intent, is they take a quote about Apple where Apple is saying that, when we're developing products, we need to make sure that they're good enough to release to our customers. And then later on in the complaint, they twist that out and say, well, Apple is not motivated to compete because they just want to make sure their products are good enough, and that's what they saddle on their users. So I think that it seems to me, unfortunately, it needs to be dealt with in a serious way. But it doesn't seem to me that there are either very, very good logic or presented. They take a lot of things out of context, and they keep inserting, that damage is done without actually, showing any damage. So everybody read the limerick. I think, it'll be summarizing, I think, what the case is all about.
Mark, the idea of them making up the facts really resonates with me, because that's what it felt like. It felt like they were taking data that we all already know, carving it up, labeling it, and then finding ways to, I guess, to back into their arguments. That, I mean, the premium smartphone market is a perfect example. I don't get it. I don't get it.
As I said, I mean, I think, I had heard some commentary where they were saying that Apple has been under investigation for like 6 years. So, and then they're saying, oh, well, that started under Trump. So it's obviously not a political thing from the Biden administration, which you could or could not agree with, but under which administration was the suit filed? And then you never seem to figure out, a cause of action until they just slam together a whole bunch of, complaints out there. One thing they spend time talking about is Apple, hindering people with, communications and creating, social, distress, for people who get a green bubble. Well, how does the Android person know it's a green bubble? That only happens on the iPhone. So again, I think they're just, picking up, any old stuff and just throwing it up there. And, it's like they took the proverbial pot of spaghetti and threw it up against the wall and they hope something sticks.
So, Marty, I want your comment, and then
I had fun with this. I had kind of read enough of the news articles and went to the opinion pieces and what Mark says about the complaint. Thank you for reading it, so the rest of us don't have to. But the Washington Post started it off by saying the complaint begins more like a poorly edited magazine article than a legal document. And from what you've said, Mark, it seems to confirm that. They also address some issues about if you're worried about the green bubble, there are all sorts of other services like WhatsApp, Signal, Discord that work just fine across platforms. And they just went into a bunch of the issues with the complaint, including the R&D development money that's placed. One of the things I realized over the last 7 years, I've been paying for a top-end iPhone. It's been the same price, but the product keeps getting better. So it's not like they're trying to pawn off last year's phone on me. There are new additions to each iPhone, but the price pretty much stays stable. And then earlier phones are sold, or previous phones are sold at a lesser cost and a discount. So I just don't get the whole iPhone exclusive nature of the phone and overpriced overpriced phones. The phone just stays the same price wise, and it just keeps getting better.
Yeah. So again, it's hard to see how that has harmed customers. And they make also to try to make a big deal about the fact that they integrate their services together. Well, that's not illegal, and obviously, it's attractive to buyers who increasingly, spend more and more money on devices. So I think it's all voluntary, and they haven't established that there's harm to consumers. They also try to keep saying, it hurts developers. Well, I don't think it hurts developers so much as it hurts competitors because they can't compete, and they're just trying to drum up some sort of ass backwards legal theory to support some sort of indeterminate unknown action.
So to take something Marty said, let me read to you I'm only going to read the introduction here in the pleadings. The Apple Computer Company, as it was then called, was founded in 1976 to make and market personal computers. From its inception, Apple had a knack for expensive high-end design and niche marketing relative to its competitors. But it struggled to compete against rivals that offered lower prices and more programs. After two decades, Apple struggled to compete against Windows personal computers, and by late 1990s, it was on the brink of bankruptcy. What was that? What was that? I mean, you're right. That sounds like the beginnings of a fairy tale, as opposed to Apple Computer founded in 1976, period, and then move on like a legal document.
Or any really specific alleges of wrongs that they've done, instead of just this hand waving broad, they're selling. Yeah, I think they're, the thing is, it seems like somebody there had some sort of animus against stock buybacks because they criticized that a couple times, and I think as Marty said, they criticized them for spending more one year on buybacks than they did on R&D. It's not clear that tripling or 10x in the amount of R&D would give them any more or better products, and it's a mark of how profitable business is that they're returning unneeded excess cash to shareholders. I mean, that's not a bad thing. That's not illegal.
And look, let's be fair about this. Okay, we're an Apple-oriented show, and so naturally, we're going to take look at it through that lens. All right, but even if you don't, and you read some of the quotes in the various articles, or do what Mark did. I'd love to tell you I read the whole thing. I tried, but A, it kept driving my blood pressure up, and B, there were parts that were just so science fiction-y that I couldn't stomach it anymore. The whole CarPlay discussion, that somehow CarPlay is Apple's attempt to take over the auto industry. That it will take over the entire instrument cluster. It'll take over all the climate controls and all the. I don't think this was exactly said, but the implication is all the non-driving systems, and there's nothing. It's implied that there's nothing that the auto industry can do about it. Apple's just going to plunk this stuff in the dashboard, and it's automatically going to take control. Yeah. If anybody could do that, somebody would have already done it. Ben, you want in?
Yeah.
Go.
I will first say this. I am the one on this panel probably most agreeable to opening up the App Store. There are parts of the current way of doing businesses that do kind of rub me the wrong way. That being said, this legal brief, this filing seems like it was written by a first-year law student. it has literally no way of standing, which honestly leads me to one other theory. This might be the kind of lawsuit that they specifically want to lose. Basically, to show certain elements of Congress that the Sherman and Clayton Acts are no longer effective.
Wow.
That's
That's
an
a theory.
interesting theory.
Yeah, I haven't heard that theory before, Ben.
Because if you look at things, do you remember back when we had whatever the name of that scammy messenger app was on Android that we
Beeper?
talked about? Yeah, whatever, the one that we talked about way too long.
Right. Yeah.
Beeper.
Yeah, Beeper. The House and Senate antitrust subcommittees referred that to the DOJ.
Keep going.
Yeah. So the way politics works, especially in certain circles, the only way some people are willing to support new legislation is if existing legislation is found to be incapable of doing what they want it to. Well, under the current Sherman Act, Apple is most definitely not monopolistic. Well, let's just say the end goal is U.S. version of DMA, some elements within Congress may require them to lose under current antitrust legislation before they'll basically copy and support a copy and paste version of the DMA as U.S. legislation. Either that or someone who was highly recommended by the ABA for a Supreme Court nomination was having a really, really bad day and didn't read something.
So, Ben, I think this is it's an interesting theory, but I have to ask you: do you really think that the people in Congress are that far thinking and that organized?
I can tell you this: if you have something with the names of both major people in both parties on it, it's not something to take lightly in this political environment.
Interesting point.
But where's your what proof would you offer that it's important to both parties? I suppose that's the thing I'm not I'm not following.
Well, the fact that you had basically this letter penned by Mike Lee and his Democratic counterpart on that subcommittee.
Well, what was that? I didn't see that. What did his letter?
It was the subcommittees referring Beeper to the DOJ for antitrust investigation.
They do that stuff like that all the time. It's just political grandstanding. It doesn't mean that legislation could get passed.
Well, let's see. Yeah, I mean, Lee and Klobuchar seem to have been the two they're the first ones that jump on anything tech related that that can be alleged is doing somebody some measure of harm, and I use the phrase harm very loosely. So I don't know. I'm like Mark. I'm skeptical because they can't seem to get anything else done. But it's certainly an interesting idea that if they were to want to try to advance additional legislation, that this would be a weird way to do it, but I just can't believe that Garland and the DOJ would put something out like this. I mean, to your point about it being feeling like a first year law student, either that or super rushed or just not well researched.
Yeah.
It's an election year. Somebody must think, I don't know why, but they must think that this will play with an electorate. I think that's exactly wrong. But
well, I want to give credit where credit's due. I saw Alex Lindsay posted on X of a little bit of commentary, and I can't quote it directly, but I'll say this: his question was, if they wanted to do some political grandstanding, why not go after like a real monopoly like Ticketmaster with the Taylor Swift debacle? And I thought, man, that's brilliant. That's exactly if this was political grandstanding, that's exactly where they should have gone, and they would have had the Swifties behind them in such a big way.
But I mean, here's the thing: Congress is trying to control technology, and what better example to be made than a $3 trillion successful business that brought itself back from the brink of destruction.
Yeah, Ben, but that assumes that you have some reasonable expectation of winning. And in looking at this, unless you have a judge that is just completely clueless, and we've talked about clueless judges on this show before, but unless you get a completely clueless judge and a completely different clueless appeal judge, I'm just not sure how far this is going to go.
Like
Brian,
I said, this won't win the courts.
It's going to go into discovery. So this is going to tie up Apple executives for years. And it's going to color every discussion of every Apple product announcement for the next several years. Everything Apple announced, the story will be, well, Apple, the company indicted by the DOJ for blah, 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 announced, remember what the Microsoft case 30 years ago and the IBM case 50 years ago.
Yeah, they still haven't had that stigma removed.
Hey, Ben, have you ever heard this Will Rogers quote? With Congress, every time they make a joke, it's the law, and every time they make a law, it's a joke.
I've never heard that, but very Will Rogers.
I like it. Yep. Brian, you had a point.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I know that there was the talk earlier about the price of the phones. When you think about, competition, a lot of Apple's phones are on the higher end of the price, but there's plenty of Android phones that are right in that same ballpark. You buy the higher end with the Galaxy models, from Samsung and stuff, the larger screen models, the higher
foldables. The foldables are $2,000.
Exactly. Yeah. So plenty of great examples of, to argue it on price is, I think, downright silly. The other thing I was thinking of, there was a line, and I kind of see part of it on both ways, because I tried to find an article that was not necessarily super, in the pro Apple or anti Apple, just kind of made some comments here. And there was one particular line that I thought was kind of interesting about an allegation. It says that Apple blocks the development of cloud streaming apps that would allow for high quality video game play without having to pay for extra hardware. I myself do play a little bit of Xbox, and to take it on the road and to play, there are options out there, and playing it on my phone without having to lug around a large console. And you can play. I was just thinking about this as it came through, because you essentially go to the website and you save it to your home screen, and then when you go there, it works. It just works. And I never even thought about it until I was rereading it. It's like, yeah, I guess it isn't an app in itself. It's a saved web page that's on the home screen.
Yeah,
but
PWA.
Right. Yeah, but from a usability standpoint, no complaints. It's all based on your as far as your internet is fast enough, I guess.
Microsoft did want to make an app about 4 years ago that would do that, and Apple said no.
Yeah.
So that's what this is about. But Apple has apparently recently done an about face on that. So it's sort of like, well, we're getting mad about something that Apple's already changed their mind about.
Yeah, very true. And there is a little bit of time in, loading that software, as it comes through. But it would be nicer. I do agree. I see the other side of the argument that if you can, have some of those files already downloaded, it'd make it faster.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.